Good afternoon and welcome back to day 2 in session 3 of Scot-Secure 21. I'm Mark Stephen. I hope you enjoyed your break. You got a chance to actually visit the exhibition area and meet some of the sponsors and possibly some of the other people attending this conference. This third session, we're going to be looking at how you go about preparing your industry for the future. How do you ensure that you have the workforce with the skills that you actually need? Our first speaker is Chris Green, Head of Communications at ISC Squared, who will be talking about the cybersecurity workforce. So Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed. Let's just bring up my first slide. There we go. So, hello and welcome everybody. My name is Chris Green. As was just said, I'm the Head of Communications at ISC Squared. I'm also the Communications Workstream Lead for the UK Cybersecurity Council Formation Project. That second role will become a bit more important a bit later on. But over the next few slides, we're going to take a quick look at the cybersecurity workforce, the opportunities and challenges in the sector for both individuals and organisations, and what we can do to make further positive progress in championing professional development and creating a more inclusive cybersecurity sector. Now, for those of you who may not be a member and are unfamiliar, a quick overview of ISC Squared and what we do. It's pretty simple. We're the world's largest non-profit association of certified cybersecurity professionals, serving our members in the industry for over 30 years. Our mission is to inspire a safe and secure cyber world, and we do that by helping cybersecurity professionals affirm their knowledge on a broad range of cyber domains, as well as provide them with training for continued learning throughout their careers. We're there to advocate for the profession and to be their voice when it comes to legislation and industry-level discussions on the role of cybersecurity and what it plays in our lives. We have more than 150,000 members in 175 countries, all working on the front lines of cybersecurity. Now, the ISC Squared Cybersecurity Workforce Study is conducted annually to assess the cybersecurity workforce gap, to better understand the barriers facing the cybersecurity profession, and to uncover strategies that organisations can use to recruit, build and strengthen their cybersecurity teams. The current study continues our work to track the number of cybersecurity professionals currently working in the field, along with the gap, which helps us understand the scope of the challenge the industry faces. Furthermore, our most recent survey asked several questions measuring the impact of COVID-19 on cybersecurity professionals and their organisations. The study participants came from 14 economies all over the world, 3 more than our previous studies. Countries included the US, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Australia, Japan, Singapore, and South Korea, with Ireland, Spain, and the Netherlands added to this most recent study for the first time. We actually heard from 553 more cybersecurity professionals than the last time we ran this research, continuing our goal of increasing the sample size and increasing the validity of these results. The margin for error for global descriptive statistics in this research is plus or minus 1.6% with a 95% confidence level. You can also see that while all our study participants have cybersecurity responsibilities, they come from a wide range of industries and they represent both smaller businesses and large enterprises. It's staggering to look back at how suddenly and quickly most organizations were forced to make a decision about sending their employees home to work remotely, and the impact that had on cybersecurity teams, who were asked to make that happen from a technical standpoint, often with almost no lead time. As this chart shows, nearly a third of cybersecurity respondents indicated that they had to facilitate their organization's immediate remote transition within 1 business day's notice, and more than 3/4 had to do it in a week's notice or less. It was a massive undertaking. Also, some additional research that we carried out in the middle of the pandemic last year revealed that nearly half, 47% of cybersecurity staff were actually reassigned to this task, pulling them away from their day-to-day cybersecurity roles until the transition was completed. It's encouraging to see that only 18% of cybersecurity staff say they saw an actual increase in the number of security incidents after the move to remote working, especially when you take into account that 34% believed at the time of the survey that their organizations were actually more exposed to security threats. It highlights the astonishing job that cybersecurity professionals as a whole have done in responding to such an unprecedented and daunting challenge. The feat is even more impressive when you consider the lack of personnel that cybersecurity teams were afforded during the height of the pandemic. 23% of respondents were aware of a colleague who had been laid off or they'd been laid off themselves. And 45% reported that they had someone they know who were working on reduced hours or had been moved to contract work as a result of the pandemic and its impact on business. This reduction in the workforce may also be an underlying factor behind a perceived drop in forward-looking personnel demand, which we'll get to in a second. 56% of respondents with titles of manager or above expressed concerns about future personnel spending. Now, the big figure. In 2019, we developed a methodology to estimate the size of the cybersecurity active workforce, and we've updated the counts for the last year. The study found approximately 3.5 million professionals are employed in cybersecurity from the global economies we measured in the survey. Something else that we found this year, the size of the global workforce has grown by 700,000 from the previous year that we ran the survey. So that's up from 2.8 million. We built our estimation methodology for the US first because the secondary data is more robust, and then we applied the same methodology to the other major economies in the study. It's important to note, we recognise that the US business dynamics and staffing models may not necessarily apply to international markets. As a result, the size of the global cybersecurity workforce should be considered our best estimate, given the lack of secondary data sources that we have available in some regions. But nonetheless, it should be a useful and reasonably honest approximation of the workforce. This slide shows the current cybersecurity workforce estimates for each country, with the workforce gap below in parentheses. As you can see, the UK has about 366,000 cybersecurity professionals working today, with a perceived gap of around 27,000 roles. In contrast, the estimate of cybersecurity pros in the US is about 879,000, with a gap of about 359,000 roles. What we continue to notice and be surprised by is the large number of skilled pros and significant gap in Brazil and Mexico in relation to Western Europe, and particularly in relation to countries such as the UK, France, and Germany. The global gap estimate for the end of 2020 is 3.12 million. Using the workforce estimate of 3.5 million based on the 14 economies for which we provided an estimate, and the global gap estimate of 3.12 million, we can estimate that the global workforce needs to grow by an additional 89% to satisfy demand. Interestingly, the shortage is not balanced worldwide. In the US, which has 879,000 plus professionals, it would need to grow 41% by adding 359,000. In other regions like APAC, the increase needed is over 2 million, or a growth rate of 327%. The cybersecurity workforce gap decreased from 4.07 million in 2019 to the 3.12 million figure that we find now. While this is still a very large number, we have to ask, why did it decrease? There's three things contributing this year: supply, demand, and the unknown impact of COVID. Firstly, let's talk a little bit about demand. In the survey, we asked respondents about their future staffing plans and anticipated number of cyber professionals on their teams. This year, anticipated future staffing counts were lower, down 5% globally compared with 2019. This was consistent across all countries measured, but the US was the biggest driver of this decrease. The fall is impacting small to medium-sized businesses, that's companies up to 250 employees, far more so than any other business sector. Now, let's talk about supply. The workforce size estimate is a separate calculation to the gap. The workforce estimate grew in 2020, which means there should be fewer roles to fill, and therefore the gap should be smaller. Our 2020 survey found that enterprises with 500 to 1,000 employees increased their average headcount from our 2019 measurement. So that's more cybersecurity professionals employed. And secondary sources reported very high employment rates in IT generally in 2020. Given we surveyed participants in April to June, just a few months into the pandemic, we can't rule out the fact that COVID introduced some, or at least a lot, of uncertainty for future planning to every organisation that we were talking to. Now this year, 25% of our survey respondents were women. That's actually slightly lower than the previous year's survey, where we'd actually hit our highest participation rate for women of 30%. The highest percentage of respondents generationally were millennials, which is critical as the baby boomer generation starts to reach retirement age. However, only 1% of the workforce is coming from Generation Z, which represents a recruitment challenge that we need to keep an eye on. Given the additional stress that cybersecurity pros were experiencing due to COVID-19, we were pleasantly surprised to see the highest satisfaction rates we've seen in several years, significantly higher than both 2019 and 2018, in fact. On the topic of certifications, these were the top 11 certifications held by participants. We also learned that 49% of participants are required by their employers to hold vendor-specific certifications. That's the certs from companies like Cisco and Microsoft and organizations like that for specific hardware, software, and services. Whilst 47% are required to hold vendor-neutral certifications, such as the CISSP or the CCNA and other professional certifications like that. Not surprising, given the shift to remote and home working driven by COVID, cloud security was the top skill cyber pros want to master in the next 2 years. Interest in cloud has always been high, but this year was significantly higher than the past 2 years. Furthermore, 63% of respondents said they're planning to pursue a cybersecurity certification in the next year. But who should be pursuing them? Our respondents feel that certifications are valuable for every level of the cybersecurity team, from the C-suite to those working in the trenches. While the value is slightly higher for staffers and managers than C-suite personnel, participants feel that certifications will help C-suite members develop and communicate security strategies more effectively to the wider organization. Now, while it's helpful to have these insights, most people want to know how the workforce gap affects them and what to do about it. For HR executives, hiring managers, and other decision makers, the question becomes, how do we find the talent to be able to fill the roles needed in the cybersecurity job market that currently has 0% unemployment? Now, there's many initiatives at work to address the skills challenges facing our industry. One that warrants particular attention is the creation of the UK Cybersecurity Council, which is due to commence operations very, very soon. In short, the UK Cybersecurity Council is a major government-sponsored initiative to create... In short, the UK Cybersecurity Council is a major government-sponsored initiative to create an independent body to professionalise the cybersecurity profession, focused on training and education and skills. Unlike other bodies in the space, like the NCSC, the Council is not a technical body. And that's a very important point to make. That's how the two will actually interoperate. I'd like to take a few moments now just to tell you some more about this project, which IC2 has been heavily involved in on behalf of our members since the bid stage of the process. We're a member of the Cybersecurity Alliance, a group of UK-based membership organisations, chartered institutions and livery companies with a strong focus on supporting and representing cybersecurity professionals. This group was commissioned by the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport in late 2019 to construct the Council as an umbrella body that could champion and support the sector. The Council is an independent body that will serve as an inclusive voice for the cybersecurity profession. It will combine elements of self-regulation for the sector with acting as an influencer and advisor to government and regulators. It will help shape and professionalise cybersecurity training by defining standards and practices. As a central body for standards and excellence, it will be a resource that will work with training providers and membership bodies as a partner, not as a replacement for them. Core to the Council is its 4 pillars of activity, which I'll explain in a moment. Together, these pillars provide the basis for the Council to support and champion the profession. The Council will improve industry and training awareness, deliver better community representation, focus on quality, ethics, and overall excellence. It will do this alongside being a centralised resource to promote the UK cybersecurity community both within the UK and globally. At the forefront of the Council's activities is professional development. It will work with organisations like IC2, employers, and with individual practitioners to help improve the development, delivery, and verification of training and skills. It will also establish an extensive qualifications and career framework. This will make it easy for practitioners and training managers to map and understand their options when seeking professional qualifications and development in this space. If the industry is to grow and to overcome the UK's cybersecurity skills shortage, then we've already highlighted, it needs to be more diverse. It needs to be more inclusive and an open working community. Broadening the skills base through positive diversity and inclusivity is core to the Council's efforts. A more diverse practitioner community brings not only more people into the sector, but new ideas, new ways of working, new approaches to problem solving, and a variety of complementary skills that we would not otherwise benefit from. As a body, the Council will work to promote cybersecurity careers to a much wider base in order to address a wide range of challenges in the cybersecurity workforce, including disparities of gender, ethnicity, age, and even neurodiversity. A strong ethical base is essential to the activities of the Council, just as it is for my own organisation. Considerable work has gone into developing a robust code of ethics and supporting principles for the Council. A strong code of ethics and code of conduct will also serve to ensure that member organisations operate responsibly and with the needs of cybersecurity practitioners at the forefront of all the decisions and actions that they might take. And finally, thought leadership will be a major part of the Council's focus, not only as a means to educate and inform the wider community, but also as a basis to influence and inform government and to campaign for the benefit of cybersecurity practitioners. The Council can draw on a wealth of knowledge, experience, and understanding of education issues, skills development, cybersecurity technologies, and challenges, as well as regulatory experience, along with supporting the Council's efforts to promote UK cybersecurity skills and professionals on the world stage. These resources will be used to help identify needs for new and altered legislation, standards and regulations, and to encourage government and other relevant bodies to support the needs of the cybersecurity community. Now, there will be more news about the Council in the coming days and weeks as it's about to commence its own independent operations, so do keep an eye out for those. And in summary, respondents to this year's cybersecurity survey indicated that the global cybersecurity workforce gap has been reduced for the first time, but a substantial gap remains. We know that this year may end up becoming an outlier due to the effects of COVID-19 on the industry, but there's been an inspiring amount of work done by cybersecurity professionals to keep organisations protected, even during the massive migration to remote working. They did it quickly and securely, and it took a wide range of personnel to achieve this truly unimaginable feat. Many of those that we rely on for securing our data and networks are not cybersecurity professionals in title, but they are in role. The future is bright if we take a more creative and collaborative approach to discovering talent wherever it resides. And the majority of those already in the field are very satisfied that they made the right choice to pursue cybersecurity as a career. If industry research such as the Cybersecurity Workforce Study is helpful to you, please do download the report from our website and check out the other studies that we have there. We also have some more new insights that will be coming up in the next few weeks and the next few months. And with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and attention. It's been my pleasure to share this with you today.
Chris, thank you very much for that. That was Chris Green there from ISC Squared. We're going to have a panel discussion now, so I'll bring Chris back immediately on this. But we're also joined by Professor Bill Buchanan, School of Computing, Edinburgh, Napier University, Claire Gillespie, Digital Technologies Sector Skills Manager at SDS, Mahbubul Islam, CISO for HM Courts and Tribunal Services. So because we haven't heard from Bill or Claire or Mahbubul, I'm just going to give them a couple of minutes each. Once we've got them up, there we go. Right, as if by magic. Ta-da, 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 ta-da. Ladies first, Claire, just introduce yourself. Tell me who you are, what you do.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Claire Gillespie. I work at Skills Development Scotland. SDS is Scotland's National Skills and Careers Agency. So we work with individuals and businesses to help them support and develop the skills they need for the economy today and going forward. My particular job is around digital technology skills, working with a range of employers to look at their technology data and cyber skills needs.
Okay, Mahbubul.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mahbubul Islam. I'm the CISO for HMCTS. I'm also a director for the Security Institute, and my engagement on the Cybersecurity Council Formation Project alongside Chris for the last 3 years has been trying to help develop the profession. So my experience is in that space.
Okay, thank you. And finally, Bill, although I suspect this will be largely redundant for our audience.
Hello, I'm Bill Buchanan. I'm a professor at Edinburgh Napier University. Our main achievement has probably been in the creation of 3 amazing Scottish spin-outs and a 4th one on the way. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that, Bill. Okay, we've got a series of questions here. I'm going to start with you, Chris. People's going to give me, you're warmed up already, so it gives us a chance to think about it. How are the security skills that we require in the workforce actually changing?
Well, I think they're evolving in a number of ways. I mean, first and foremost, the impact of the cloud, I think, has had a significant impact on the skill set that's being required by a lot of organizations. You know, if you look across most companies today, far more of the resources and the infrastructure that we're using is remote and distributed. And so cybersecurity skills need to adapt and change to cope with working in an environment where you have to extend the castle walls far further than the traditional office environment. So a deep understanding of cloud platforms, a deep understanding of the vulnerabilities and the evolving environment of the cloud is absolutely essential. But that's not to say that you can't overlook the traditional areas as well. And it's just as key that cybersecurity pros are just as well versed in traditional on-premise challenges, particularly areas such as ransomware, which continues to be a major threat, as well as things like social engineering. So, you know, what I'd say is, whilst areas such as cloud are very much on the ascension at the moment, what is critical is that cybersecurity pros maintain a rounded understanding of the threats, challenges, and the opportunities out there, and really, you know, continuous education continues to be key to their skills development.
What's kind of passing? Well, I was about to say passing through your classrooms at the moment, Bill, but it's more likely to be passing across your screen. I mean, you know, the people that are coming forward.
Sorry, could you just repeat the last question there?
The people that are coming forward, I mean, the figure that Chris quoted of, you know, that globally the industry needs to grow by 89% is staggering. So why? Why is there a shortage?
Basically, everyone just sees this as one profession, but it's not. This defined there were 52 different job roles, and you're moving from business risk analysts to pen testers to cryptography people and so on. It's a wide spectrum, and I think maybe a lot of kids, a lot of undergraduates want a job in digital forensics in law enforcement, but we know for a fact that the jobs are in finance in Edinburgh and Glasgow and the big security operations centres. So there's a bit of matching where the jobs actually are. And the one thing I learned about cybersecurity, it's all about the business case. It's all about good soft skills, people skills, and if you can marry that up with good technical skills, then you're on a winner. So this is an industry where there's a job for everyone, and there's a role. There's architects, there's test debuggers, and there's business analysts. But unless you can pay the bills and unless your organisation can actually achieve what it's meant to do, then everything's fine. And I think you've got to understand that we're in a very brittle world. So healthcare is hopefully the next one that will be digitised. Imagine the problem that we would have if someone attacked our healthcare infrastructure in the UK. It happened with ransomware in Germany, that someone lost their lives. So it's great to see that the UK is starting to understand that our defences are important to us, and our cybersecurity infrastructure is just as critical. In Scotland, we tend to have few links to the outside internet. So our whole connectivity to the world, again, is under risk. So I'd like to see governments understanding resilience and make sure that we understand where our weaknesses are and to be able to secure these things. And I'd love to see a time of innovation in Scotland where we grow small companies and they get the opportunity to work with governments. So I think, in summary, the skills really are for developing well-rounded individuals.
Well, is this an industry that attracts people with good soft skills?
So from the research that we've done, the answer is yes, it does. The challenge is making sure that we are accessible and available as an industry. We do often, historically, it's been very male-dominated industry. We've gone through the whole D&I piece, inclusive piece, and making it available. So I think there's lots needs to be done in terms of educating the next generation of people going back to university, preschools and stuff like that, and providing an overview of what cybersecurity is and what they can do in that industry. And as Bill said, cybersecurity is vast. There's so many different things, and everything can be shoehorned into cybersecurity. So it's making sure that we're very clear with our messaging. We are accommodating and accepting of all sides of the fence. At the same time, we're working on not just the technical side, the soft side of things as well, and saying those skills can be used. For example, leadership, communication, negotiation, all of those things are very useful in the form of cybersecurity, as well as other things as well. Obviously, I've not listed every single thing that can be used as a soft skill, but the opportunity is there to make sure that we can move people from other industry into our industry and vice versa.
Going back to what Chris was talking about, Claire, he said that the survey that they put out on an annual basis, the best they ever managed to achieve was 30% female respondents. What's the problem? What's the hold-up?
So the cyber industry, unfortunately, is a bit worse than the wider tech industry in terms of general representation, and in particular around female representation. I think there's a multitude of challenges. A lot of this stems, I think, from young girls and their perception of technology and cybersecurity, and there's, I think, a lot of work to do at schools, and we do a lot of this already, but there's certainly more to be done with parents and influencers about the range and understanding of cyber and technology careers. And there's a really strong appetite working with employers to be more inclusive and look at how they diversify their employment. But what we need to do first of all is make sure the talent's coming through the system with the right skills. But work with employers. There can be simple things that employers can do sometimes about the recruitment practice, about the language you use, for example, and advertisements, and even the working practices, which actually they don't realise aren't being fully inclusive. So with the best of intentions, sometimes that they're not reaching the audiences maybe they should. And I think one of the big challenges for cyber for tech, for example, is a lot of advertising and recruitment through word of mouth and through informal networks. And by doing things like that, although cost effective and actually quite often effective in terms of filling roles, means you're naturally excluding some individuals who are not already part of your talent pool. But there's certainly moves in the right direction. I think in terms of diversity in its very widest sense, employers are looking more to college graduates, they're looking to apprentices, they're looking to a range of individuals to fill their roles. And I think, as public sector agencies and education and government work together, just need to make sure we put in the support so employers feel confident about putting in place these practices, and also we're filling the pipeline with the right numbers and the right types of individuals coming through.
Talking about barriers, there's a question here from Salam Kayala saying, Chris, is there any alternative for SC clearance for hiring for cybersecurity forensics IR professionals? Because of this criteria, most of the candidates are being denied, even though there's good scope to fill the gap.
It's a good question, and to the best of my knowledge, I can't think of an alternative route in. I don't know if the rest of the panel actually has any different thoughts on that.
Okay. I missed the question. Apologies.
The question was, is there any alternative for SC clearance while hiring for cybersecurity forensics IR professionals? Because of this criteria, most of the candidates are being denied, even though there's good scope to fill the gap.
So if it's SC clearance for government, and I'll start on that, and then other colleagues can jump in. SC clearance is, if that's what I'm thinking the question is around, is a government requirement for vetting that is fundamental for delivery of services. There is a reform part of this going on at the moment in reviewing what vetting requirements is required and how vetting is going to be done across government. Please look into the Cabinet Office guidance and you will find some information in that space. But at this moment in time, criteria are set by NCSC and we have to follow that. It is quite challenging to find colleagues who are vetted to the right level, experience at the right level, and all those other things, dynamics that come into it. My view is carry on doing your, practicing your expertise and not necessarily limiting to the UK. The cybersecurity is global, so you can apply your resources in any part of the world. not just limited to the UK.
Is there any part of the world where, if you'd worked, that would actually be a black mark on your CV? Bill?
Me? Oh, right. Yeah, I've seen many occurrences of this, but I'm not going to say where they are in the world. But you can probably, from the news, yeah, there's certain areas. I mean, we have to put individuals through security clearance, and you can see it's a lot for if they've been on holiday, even in a certain place. So all I say is that watch what you post on social media, and that anyone will go and trace that. But there are certain keywords that you should probably use.
Bill, you're saying
abuse.
You're freezing. You want to take that back. You're saying you're going to be careful what you put on social media, and then you went on to say something else.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a CIA filter on this. Yeah, so I think you've got to make sure that am I coming through? Okay, you've just got to make sure that you watch what you do and where you go on holiday and so on. And if you do want a security clearance job, then you probably want to avoid certain regions of the world.
Thoughts on that, Claire? Have you any thoughts on that, Claire?
Oh, sorry, Mark, I missed that. No, I'm probably not the best person to answer that question, being more a sort of public sector skills type person. Probably I don't have a view on that. Maybe some of my other panel colleagues might, Mark.
No, okay, no problem at all. Chris, there's another question here aimed at you. It's from your colleague, James Kwan. So he's probably just winding you up. So does the actual shortage translate into jobs, or is this just a statistic?
No, it absolutely does translate into jobs. And whilst I wouldn't say that, I'm not for a moment suggesting that there's 3.5 or 3.12 million job vacancies out there, but there are 3.12 million unfulfilled roles. Now, in some cases, that translates into direct job vacancies. The majority of them do indeed translate into job vacancies. But in other cases, it translates into unfulfilled roles that can and ultimately will end up being filled through things like multi-skilling, for example. But as we all know, we cannot completely wipe out the gap by having people do two jobs. It's just simply not practical. So for the most part, yes, the shortage does equal active fillable jobs for people right now. And it's one of the reasons why the cybersecurity sector continues to have one of the lowest, if in some markets, non-existent unemployment.
Well, is there enough awareness, do you think, of the different routes and pathways into cyber?
No, I don't think there is enough information. It's it's very much fragmented, and I will have to say this, and Chris can tell me off later, but there will be some sort of guidance and processes available from the Cybersecurity Council Formation Project, which will allow you to understand the entry point into cybersecurity. A lot of work has gone into that space to understand that properly. And that's, I'm also going to say it's not a finished article. There's always going to be more entries in, more exits out of that process. But ultimately, we as an industry, security professional, I'll put myself into this, we complicate things a lot. And the point is we're trying to demystify the whole process of getting into cybersecurity and the different tree branches that comes out of that route as well. So if you're looking at the underground map in London, is how do you get from one part of the role to another role? You can look at it that way. The journey you take, the experience you need, the skills you require, all of that has been documented. But at the moment, there isn't anything centrally available. Each organization has their own. Each government department has their own. So looking at the government security profession, that's an entry. That's a good starting point. Looking at the Cybersecurity Council Formation Project's output, that's going to be another option as well. And then individually, professional bodies will have their own as well. So pen testers will have their own and others. So I think if you're in a specific discipline, it's a lot easier. But if you're trying to get into it just generally, it's hard.
Claire, how young should we be trying to catch them?
tiny, I think. So I think, right back into primary school, the kind of minute that they're able to, and maybe even before that, arguably, the minute they're able to engage with computers and think about computing and get involved in making things and being creative, I think is when we have to start. And I think that's one of our big challenges. I think quite often we start technology skills awareness and careers awareness and cyber as well, just too late in the curriculum, and both in terms of careers awareness. And kind of merging this question with your previous question, there's a lot of information out there about cyber careers. We host a lot of it on Digital World. We cascade a lot into schools, and some of the information is excellent. But the challenge is getting to those people who aren't thinking about cyber just now. So if you know you want to work in tech or you want to work in cyber, then the information is there, and a lot of it's quite inspiring. And there's a range of pathways. But I think a really big challenge is getting to those young people, those young girls in particular, who aren't thinking about cybersecurity and aren't thinking about tech. And I think one of the ways we do this is from as young an age as possible, start to blend it into other subjects. So hybrid skill sets being created and blending it into areas where the young people don't actually know they're learning about cyber and tech. They're there for something else. And one of our examples is we worked with Girl Guides in Scotland to create a digital coding badge. So reaching girls who probably wouldn't have come to a coding club, but taking the coding and the tech to them. So I think that there is some really good practice, but what we need to do is scale it more across Scotland and certainly take it back into earlier in the curriculum and earlier in the sort of primary school environment.
That does sound quite cunning. There's a question come in here from Graham Stronach, NHS National Services Scotland, with immaculate timing. Bill, he says, should cyber information security become a standard subject taught to all at secondary school?
Thanks for that question. I'll pay you back later. Yes, I mean, really, we've been talking about this for so long, about producing a tech workforce, but we switch kids off technology coding at such an early age. Did you know that computer science doesn't even get into the top 10 in Scotland and is one of the biggest fallers at N5 and higher? Kids are moving towards other subjects which are seen to be easier. So I think we've lost a good part of the population, and that we switch off girls at N5. 15% of girls take the computer science course. So how are you going to create a diverse, a gender-neutral workforce if you already lost the majority of the talent that's going to be there? So I think, as Mark Logan says, computer science needs to be on a par with maths and the other sciences and English. And when that happens, you actually have a level playing field. So in first year, we've got to maybe teach them how to do operating systems and to program again, because we can't be guaranteed that they've ever programmed at any given time. So I think we need to understand that it starts at level 4. We start at level 7 and we go all the way up. But we're not seeing enough of the backfill from schools. We can't even get enough computer science teachers, for goodness sake. We can't attract people into the industry to teach our most important assets, which is our kids. So hopefully Mark's report will start to make some impact, and we'll start to see serious investment at that lower level and make sure our kids can code naturally. Because once they can code, then they're engineers. They could be an engineer. I mean, I'd just as much like them to go into electrical engineering and so on. So I think there's some degree we've almost like grown a profession without really thinking what we actually are and how we actually contribute. Because an engineer is just as interested in cybersecurity, and cybersecurity people should be just as interested in engineering. So I think there's a lot of building that we need to do and a lot of education. And the thing is, it's all part of our world that we need to inform kids and teachers about the opportunities. So hopefully things will change in Scotland.
I think this is the 7th cybersecurity conference that Digit has organised. And it must be about 5 or 6 years ago. There was a chap came on and says, I became a computer science teacher the day I had a free period. And the computers arrived and they needed somebody to carry them into the classroom, and I unboxed them. says, and that gave me all the edge I needed to become a computer science teacher. I mean, it was that simple. He was in the right place at the right time and what have you. And he was 2 pages ahead of the rest of the class. Chris, where in the world is doing this well? Where are actually attracting young people in early enough?
It's mostly in APAC. Which interestingly also has one of the biggest gap problems as well. But if you look at curriculums in certain parts of APAC, there is much more of a broader IT focus. They're going beyond what we're all doing in Western Europe and in the US, where we continue to focus purely on teaching kids how to code. Now, don't get me wrong, teaching kids how to code is an absolutely essential skill. It's how I learned how to code. And I've been through many careers before I found myself where I am today. And I started off as a software developer before I did anything else. And that came about partly from the coding skills I learned in school and partly from the coding skills I learned on my own as a bedroom coder as a teenager. But I never learned a single thing about IT security. Nothing was ever done or shaped in the curriculum to teach people about appropriate, safe, and ethical use of computers. When you got the crafty kids in class that were doing rudimentary hacking, I may or may not have been one of them. Nothing was ever done to deter you from doing that. And the problem is that if you look at entry-level computer studies, even today, some 30 years later, not a lot has changed. And that's why we need a fundamental curriculum change. When we look at particularly what's going on in countries like Japan, Korea, places like that, whilst I'm not saying their curriculums are perfect, but they are at least touching upon a broader range of subjects, including they are teaching much more about cybersecurity and cyber ethics. And we need to embrace more of the same, and we need to do it early so that we can sow that seed of appropriate use and interest early on. Doing so will hopefully bring more people through via STEM-based subjects and help us build a larger talent pool that we can draw from.
Well, Google, how well do you think academia and government and business actually line up in ensuring that there will be sufficient numbers of people with appropriate skills?
So could you repeat that question again, please?
Yeah, surely. How well do you think the world of academia, government and business actually align in ensuring there's sufficient numbers of folk with the appropriate cybersecurity skills?
Okay, so I'll start off with the government side of things. Academia, I'm very much limited to my knowledge, so I'll have to pass it on to other colleagues for that. So from a government perspective, we have got a cyber apprenticeship scheme across Westminster and elsewhere, and we've invested a lot of time and money in making sure colleagues are joining the civil service with very limited background in cybersecurity, and we train them up through the process. And it's not just level 4; we've gone to level 7 apprenticeships as well, degree apprenticeships as well. And the thing I always say to people is, whilst we and government are responsible for making sure we've got a cyber workforce internally, we've also doing a lot of work around policies and enabling certain activities to happen outside of our civil service life, for example, via Department for Education, through the UK Cybersecurity Council formation projects, various other initiatives as part of the National Cybersecurity Strategy. All of those things form part of the responsibility for government. But there's also responsibility for employers as well, and that's the thing that I would like to highlight. You have to go and ask your employer how many apprentices are in your workforce. As an example, in my team, 10% of my workforce is apprentices, and that's a decision that I've made through my leadership team to make sure that that happens. But if your organization is not also contributing to making sure you've got people coming into your organization with very limited knowledge to get into the workforce, it becomes a problem for academia and government. It's not an employer problem. I see it as a shared issue that needs to be resolved across all sectors and all industries. So do ask that question internally. And if your team is within your organization and you haven't got a number fixed to your junior member of staff or postgrad students and or graduates, you should look at that in a bit more detail.
Claire.
Yep. Same question, Mark.
Please.
Yes, so I come at this maybe with inherent bias, being from a public sector body funded by government. However, I think we're quite well aligned and quite joined up. And I think we've got a strategic framework around cybersecurity, which government published a couple of weeks ago, which has a learning and skills action plan within it, for example. And underneath that, we've got strategic advisory boards and work streams. And I think what is important about all of these groups is they've got industry on them, they've got education, they've got academia, they've got public bodies and government. So I think in terms of us being convened around a shared goal and a shared vision and genuinely working together, I think we're very, very well aligned. And there's some really good examples, I think, of joint projects that we've delivered. And a lot of the Skills Development Scotland projects, particularly things like our Tech Experts in Schools project and the things we do around Discover Cyber and kind of raising awareness of skills is very much industry focused. Using industry to inspire young people and take the message into schools, but also ensuring industry are the voice of the project and making sure that we keep the focus correct and very much relevant for industry needs. I think sometimes where we have a challenge actually is engaging with employers and getting them to articulate what they need from the skills system. And I don't underestimate how hard that is, both in terms of quantity and content. It's very hard for an employer to tell us in the education and public sector how many of different people they need just now and in a few years and what those particular skill sets are. But I think we have some good ways of working with employers. We've done quite a lot of research under our belt. We've got a research plan for next year going forward. But what we also have to do is influence others. And one thing I'm very aware of, and we've mentioned it already, is that cybersecurity isn't available as all parts of the curriculum and they're not part of every school. Some schools offer cybersecurity, and I think there's a job there for the strategic bodies to influence head teachers and local authorities and directors of education much more. So we do have cyber opportunities across the whole of Scotland and in every school, ideally.
Bill, do you think employers actually know what they need just now, today, rather than, never mind 5 years' time?
Employers want good people. If you're a geography graduate and you're smart, then you can become a data scientist easily. So good people are what is needed to be created, people with excellent skills, problem solvers. So the jobs of the past are the jobs of the past, the more menial jobs. The jobs of the future are in creativity and enterprise and innovation and problem solving and so on. And we've been here before. And I remember the 1970s, some people might not have even been born, but in the 1970s, an amazing little device came along called the transistor, and a whole industry was created almost in a decade. The electronic engineering industry was created, and education had to evolve and create new courses. And at first, it was like wacky races. You never quite knew what your electronics degree was going to be. But after a while, they settled down and they understood exactly, if I call it electrical engineering with computer engineering, that's what I get. If I call it electrical engineering and something else, then it's something else. And that settled down. And the only way that happened was because the IEE, the IEEE, ACM settled the subject down and started to define some standards for the topics that were taught. So just because you say that you teach pen testing doesn't mean that you're producing graduates that maybe understand how to write pen testing tools. So I think through the NCSE, we're starting to see the curriculum being developed, and there is now a certification. We've had our certification for our MSc for a decade, and we define certain standards, and it fits to the CyBOK, Cybersecurity Book of Knowledge framework. So when graduates come off our courses, they know exactly the kind of things that they've done. For our undergraduate provision, like it or not, we've had to make sure that we add a lot more software development, a lot more software security in our courses, and we've created a course which is certified at undergraduate level. So I think the only way forward is really to understand what it is we need to be teaching so that employers can understand what the output level is. What's the difference between an MSc graduate and a BEng graduate? What's the difference between a BEng graduate and a HND graduate? So hopefully that will evolve, and because of the standards that's happening in the UK, we'll see really a lifting up of the profession and a better understanding of how it all fits together. I do think there are weaknesses: school to college, college to university, and then university to the jobs market. We need to make sure that that all works together seamlessly, allows kids to leave and come back again, allows them to go into industry and come back. So I think industry and academia need to work together, especially further in higher education and working with schools. We're keen on the neurodiversity issue. We'd really want to make sure that our courses become neurodiverse and we actually start to be attracting people with different types of attitudes to work. So I see it happening, but we all need to work together to make this happen.
Chris, Kevin Donaghy from Virtual Channel wants to know, what advice would you give people considering changing careers to enter cybersecurity to ensure they don't waste time and money on unscrupulous online training courses?
Well, I mean, dare I say it, it's a lovely setup. You know, this is one of the things where the UK Cybersecurity Council will very much be a useful resource for anyone looking to enter the industry. You know, it will be a definitive source of guidance and listing for providers and courses that are credible, accredited, you know, and will actually, more importantly, put you on the correct pathway for a career in the industry. But, you know, also there are other sources that you can turn to other than the UK Cybersecurity Council for that guidance. The NCSC, for example, you know, recognises a variety of different courses, particularly for things like its own certification. So it's cybersecurity professional certification, recognises several courses, including one from my own organisation, as an acceptable and credible route into the industry. So the key thing is don't just look at a cheap price or anything like that online for a course. Go and research it, look at independent sources to ensure that the course and the provider that you're looking to go with is a credible one, and that the course, more importantly, will actually lead to a recognised certification at the end of it. Because at the end of the day, the important thing is ensuring that the qualification that you get is actually, you know, going to have an impact on your career progression plans. There's no point getting a qualification if it's not the qualification that potential employers are looking for.
I do wonder how, if you went into most Scottish secondary schools, Mabubu, I do wonder how many guidance teachers would actually be able to say, right, here's a course, and here is where you can actually get, you know, here's the validation that says it's a good course.
So I don't think that's going to be something that is going to be well understood and delivered upon. So it's an area of work that will need to be driven centrally, whether it's from central government or whether it's through the professional bodies, to educate the teachers, to make sure that they've got an understanding of what guidance to give. You know, career coaches and stuff like that is important to have, and I'm sure there will be those kind of processes in place. And just want to add something that on the question from previously. If you're doing a course and you don't know if it's a valid one, speak to somebody who's in the profession or in the industry to get some guidance, to make sure that you are doing the right thing. So going back to the original question, I don't think there's enough knowledge out there, and if there is enough knowledge out there, it depends in the type and the various levels as well. So if you're going to, you know, doing you know, something for really young children, it's going to be different for you know, teenagers, and it's going to be different for going to university. So all those kind of things that Bill's mentioned earlier about the different touch point between the different schools and colleges and universities and the career progression in that space, I think there must be a dimension in there around guidance on what they could do and what sort of areas they could go in and learn from.
Yeah. And Bill was talking about trying to attract more people into his courses and, you know, neurodiverse. Claire, why does, I mean, this is an obvious question, but probably worth answering. Why do diversity and representation matter within cybersecurity? Why is it important?
So I think it's massively important, and I'm really pleased that Bill has picked up the point around neurodiversity. We did some research around this, which we published last year, and Bill and colleagues are part of some projects we're doing around neurodiversity and cyber. It's hugely important because, you know, at one level, it's the right thing to do. We should be inclusive. We should be making our work practices as diverse and inclusive as possible. but it also makes business sense. If you look at all the research, businesses which are diverse in the very broadest sense of the word, they make better products, they make better services, they have better team working, ultimately they have better profits. And again, if you look at the research, particularly into neurodiversity, people who have neurodiverse conditions have very transferable skills into cyber and tech. So, an ability around creative thinking, for example, and problem solving, a greater ability to focus on repetitive tasks and do it very well. So there's a real translation between neurodiverse individuals and some of the skills and disciplines that tech and cyber jobs need. We also have a talent shortage in many ways, albeit it's changing over recent years. And we need to be as inclusive to make sure that we are giving everyone the opportunity to fill this talent shortage, both from those individuals getting access to good quality jobs, but also to support employers fill these jobs with the right people with the right skills. So I think being inclusive and being diverse is of great importance to business. It makes business sense and is massively important, I think, to the economic prosperity of Scotland, supporting individuals through COVID, looking at kind of tech and cyber economic recovery is massively important, Mark.
Well, thank you all very much for your input. Bill Buchanan, Mahbub Islam, Chris Green and Claire Gillespie. Much obliged for your time this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to hang on because the last hurrah of these 2 days is going to be Professor Bill Buchanan, OBE from the School of Computing at Edinburgh Napier University. Bill's very kindly, Bill, I hope that was you that made that noise. Bill's going to be talking about encryption and cryptography, saviors or destroyers of our society. I hate to think what he's doing behind the microphone, but we'll bring Bill Buchanan back up. Bill, over to you.
Good. Thank you. That was a really interesting panel. So I won't wear the mask. I've been told not to wear it. Okay, so I won't do that. So I've been lucky enough to be part of quite a few of the conferences in the past, and there was one in particular where I probably spent the whole time on one slide and then had to rustle through the rest of them very quickly. So that's probably going to happen the same with this one. So I'll probably time out, and at the end of the presentation, I'll probably rush through. But all the slides will be available and you can watch them really in your own time. What I'd like to present in this presentation is really to look at something that I'm extremely passionate about, and it's the area of cryptography. And I always find it amusing the number of media presenters who struggle with the word cryptography. So they'll often say professor of cryptologic or something like that. And it just shows you that some of the media don't quite understand our industry and what the fundamental underpinnings are. And I think we've got to move away from a superficial level. So most of you would know this as encryption. And I'll try to outline how good an area it is and how it can build a new world, but also some of the problems that it can bring. Okay, so this was one of my last events that I attended. So I was lucky enough to attend this event in November, and there I presented a live demonstration of some of the risks of the future. So while many people paint this picture of an amazing world of artificial intelligence and devices which help us, I see so many risks. So in the past, I've given presentations. I've used Kayla the doll here, and we can see Mark there. This is one of the conferences from the past. And I'm sorry that I can't do any interaction with the audience and so on, but it was always an honour to be part of this conference, and it was always such an engaging event. In the past, too, I've been lucky enough to outline some of the things that have happened to me, such as being kicked off LinkedIn twice, which is quite scary. If anyone has ever lost their connectivity to social media, they'll know that they actually feel that they've lost a voice. And you could probably ask Donald Trump how he felt when he was kicked off social media. So we need to understand the power that some of these major US companies now have, and they may have even more power than governments now, and could probably bring down nations. So I'd like to outline my viewpoint of cryptography. So what I've done is, I don't know if you can see this, but I've actually drawn some pictures here. So it might be a little bit difficult to see it, but I thought because I can't do any interaction, I'll try and outline some of the things around the areas of cryptography. And really, this whole industry started around the 1974 with Horst Fresnel, who developed the DES cipher. So IBM were a big company in the area, and they were one of the first to actually create ciphers where you could have a key and protect the data. Then it was in '78 that Whitfield Diffie came along, and he really laid the foundations of our industry by proposing public key encryption, and along with that, he came up with an amazing key exchange method that we still use today, and that's the Diffie-Hellman method. And then in '79, it was Reverse Shamir and Alderman that came along with their RSA encryption method and was one of the first to use public key encryption. And it's still a method that we use extensively whenever we connect to the internet. Then Audi Shamir came up with the principle of zero-knowledge proofs. Why do I have to give away my date of birth? Why do I have to give away my password, where all I want to do is to prove that I have knowledge of something? And then the amazing Ralph Merkle came along in '82 and created the Merkle tree, which is now the focus of blockchain methods. But it was in 1982 that the cypherpunks came along. And these cypherpunks were May, Hughes, and Gilmore. And they saw a new world, and a world which was much more trusted, and used public key encryption at its core to build new models in finance and to create a more distributed world. And it was Timothy May who said, just as the technology of printing altered and reduced the power of medieval guilds and social power structure, so will cryptologic fundamentally change the nature of corporations and of government interference in economic transactions. It's a bold, bold statement, but he could see a future which really flipped up our society. And many people think that blockchain methods are a single thing and it's all to do with Bitcoin. But the world has moved on. After 10 years of Bitcoin, it's still moving. But that's the fourth T of blockchain. We've moved on to version 2, Ethereum, smart contracts and so on. And now we get instant consensus through our third generation blockchain, through IOTA and with Hyperledger and so on. So we need to understand how we can use these infrastructures to improve our trustworthiness of our transactions. And it was Merkle who came up with the amazing Merkle tree, where we could take our data at the lowest level and then we can hash and produce an overall hash to verify all of the data that we have and to be able to instantly audit within our data infrastructure. And then if we link that to blocks, we can create immutable ledgers. And we live in a 7-layer model of the world. And perhaps there's a new model that we can build. And that model might look something like this. At the lowest layer, rather than data link and Ethernet, we might be looking at cryptography. But we can't really build on cryptography, so we need a software engineering layer that will sit above that. And then once we get that right, we can then start to build that and create governance and rights and build our societies as they were meant to. So we've got to understand that the world that we've built is really a legacy world, and what we need to do is to move away from that towards a more trusted world. And for us, our toolkit is public key encryption. It's zero knowledge proofs. It's range proofs. Why do I have to prove my age when it's just that I have to prove I'm in a certain age range? So there are a whole lot of tools that we can now use that can be built up to create amazing new trusted infrastructures. We should become the architects of the future. We should build systems which are resilient, which are citizen-focused, and so on. So the opportunities for innovation have never been so apparent. So because I'm a professor, I'm keen to teach you something. And hopefully you kind of know this already. I used to be an electrical engineer, and as an electrical engineer, the principles of being an electrical engineer was that I knew Ohm's law. It wouldn't do any good to be an electrical engineer if I didn't know how to use Ohm's law. So cryptography and encryption and the protection of data should be a generic skill that every cybersecurity professional should have, and everyone should understand that these are professionals and they have professional standards. So the most basic, symmetric key, I use one key and I use the same key on the other side. And in this area, we talk about Bob and Alice, and then we talk about our adversary Eve and Mallory. But there's also Peggy, the prover, and Victor, the verifier, and Trent, the trusted entity. And we should tell stories using these roles. So the most basics that we have with encryption and cryptography is to use the same key for Bob and Alice. We obviously need to then use a key exchange method, and that's where we use a Diffie-Hellman method, typically to get the key from Bob and Alice so that Eve can't hear it. But the magic of building a new world is having public key encryption, and where we create a private key, which we keep secret, and then we have our public key. When we're proving our identity, we use the private key to sign for something, and then everyone can use our public key to be able to prove our identity. Email causes so many problems. Why? Because it's completely unauthenticated. You can never prove anyone who has sent an email to you. You can also not prove that anyone has actually read your email, or if anyone has actually changed anything in it. So we need to really look at how we can use public key encryption to improve the trustworthiness of our systems. And then, of course, we have one-way hashes to make sure that we can take our data, squeeze it, and we can get a thumbprint. Unbelievably, many in the industry are still using MD5 and SHA-1, and we need to move away from those methods towards more trusted methods and understand what it is we're actually trying to build, because we might break the internet in an instance. So let's look at the sinner part. So we've heard about how great encryption could possibly be about protecting privacy, improving identity, and giving rights to someone. But there are weaknesses, and encryption and cryptography is seen to be a sinner. And it's a sinner because we're just not good at it. I hate to say it, but really, as an industry and as a profession, and generally across technology, it is one of the least understood areas. One of the most important areas for data protection, access control, trustworthiness, but really we are not good at it at all. The number of data breaches that happen virtually every day and encryption hasn't been used is astonishing. The number of weaknesses that are identified where passwords have been hashed using weak methods is astonishing. And when the CEO of Equifax stands up and says, I don't actually know if we're encrypting customer data at all. That's not really my job anymore. We're really worried. And then when Dido Harding says that I can't confirm if we're encrypting credit card details or not, shows a negligence at the C-level of our boards, that the chief executive and C-level do not understand the technology of what happens underneath. And this was a research paper recently, and it asked developers to encrypt a password for a system, and it paid them a certain amount of money. And these developers went ahead and implemented their own techniques. And astonishingly, 23% of them used MD5 to encrypt passwords. If you know anything about this area, you'll know that MD5 is not an encryption method, and it is extremely weak. Followed by base64, which has this level of security in it. And then bcrypt, which is right, PBKTFS2, which is right, and so on. So you can see that the majority of software developers here do not understand the basic principles. They're cribbing code off the internet, and they're thinking that it's actually secure. And one person said that they were using base64 because nobody can read it. If you know anything about base64, you'll know that it's an encoding method and not an encryption method. And the second thing now is end-to-end encryption. Signal, WhatsApp, they are methods that are now encrypting from one end to the other without this horrible TLS tunnel, HTTPS in the middle. And they give very little opportunities for law enforcement to listen to the bad people. So one method that's proposed is the ghost in the machine. And the ghost in the machine is not to break the tunnel or the cryptography, but to actually sit and listen at either end of the communication. And Australia and Five Eyes are going after cryptography and looking for backdoors and trying to force technology companies to implement ways that would allow law enforcement and government agents to be able to break communications. And we see in the UK too that it's not a trusted method to use this end-to-end encryption. So one of the ways that's happening now is for companies like Facebook, who will own Instagram and lots of other packages, to mine the metadata and to link your identities across different platforms, which is worrying from a user point of view, because now your communications in WhatsApp could communicate themselves into Facebook, because obviously Facebook bought WhatsApp for a reason, and that reason was the user base, so they could actually start to understand what people were saying and who their friends were, and so on. So we're starting to see more in terms of breaking this end-to-end communications from the service providers and also from the law enforcement. But there's an even bigger problem. An even bigger problem is that now our adversaries are using the attack tools against us. And one of the worst is with ransomware. And now encryption and all the amazing things that encryption have been bringing are being brought to bear as the tool of choice for the adversary. We've seen it in the NHS with WannaCry. We've seen it with Travelex being knocked down, and Garmin and so on. It's a blunt tool. The adversary has been on our network possibly for a while, and as they leave, they will exfiltrate data, but they will also drop ransomware. And it's almost, well, a very high chance that the company will actually pay the ransom and the criminal will be successful. So the grim reality is that the demands are increasing. It's causing downtime in networks. There's potential loss of life, reputation, and the conviction rate is 0.07%. So the chances of being caught and making a lot of money are, well, chances of being caught are low, chances of making lots of money are high. It's a good focus for any criminal network. And it's a global problem and affects so many industries. We've been very lucky in the UK not to have another WannaCry, but it might happen tomorrow. And in the US, it's one of the biggest areas for ransomware demands because of the sensitivity of the data. Your healthcare data is worth 10 times that of a credit card. So it's worth their weight in gold. And if someone can lock data, then they have a higher chance of a demand being paid. And it happened recently in Germany that it even led to a loss of life. So when we lose data or there's any outage of data, we can cause major problems and systems can fail. And there's many ways that it can come into the network. It's typically the spear phishing email Trojan. It's the remote desktop connection that has been left unsecure that you can find on Shodan that gets you into the network. So there are many different ways of actually intruding into the network. The ransomware demand is the end of the kill chain where the adversary will look to profit. And what's the chance of payment? Well, 45% of companies pay the ransom and get their data back, but 20% pay it and it doesn't actually work. And less than 50% of companies don't actually pay the ransom. And we're not really seeing the statistics, and a lot of this will go under the covers. So the way it works, basically, is that Eve just has to pass her public key onto the ransomware. A new encryption key is created, and then that encryption key is encrypted with the public key of Eve and is sent back to Eve's network. So when a key is required, then Eve can open it up with her private key and encrypt the data. But more and more, what we're seeing is an offline encryption. The Eve doesn't have to get the key, and the Eve embeds the key that's encrypting the file into the metadata of the ransomware, and she will encrypt that key with her public key and then create a document, a ransomware document, an encrypted document. Now, what she says to Bob is, give me 10 samples and I'll decrypt them for you. So Bob sends 10 samples. She uses her private key. She takes the encrypted key for the ransomware, unencrypts that little key, and then is able to unencrypt the whole of the file. So the days of command and control, sending back messages and so on are gone. This can all be done without Eve having to get anything sent back. So the kill chain for ransomware is kind of like this. Standard infiltration, identify the files of interest, keep away from the EXEs and the DLLs, don't lock the machine, go for the Python files and the PowerPoints and the Word documents and so on, then encrypt them and leave a way that the user can make a payment. It might be a video channel. It's certainly going to be a cryptocurrency transfer. So when it comes to the actual number of strains that are actually created these days, we find that the stop one is responsible for the majority of them at the current time. But Phobos is certainly one of the leading ones that is there as part of the ransomware infrastructure. When it comes to infections, this is a list of the infections that have happened recently for breaches. And we can see that about 40% of them have been caused by spam campaigns. We have corrupt web pages, phishing attacks, and other vulnerabilities. So there are a number of ways that someone can find their way into the network and drop the ransomware. So these show some of the recent ones here. And the one thing you'll find here is that they are typically using no command and control. So if your tools are detecting the connection back to the command and control center, then you can see that you're going to have problems in detecting that. Most of the ransomware now will be self-contained within the infection. And some people have got so rich that they've even retired. So in May 2019, the developers of GandCrab decided to retire. They created a ransomware as a service, so it's possible for someone to subscribe to this, and then the ransomware providers will provide the whole service for them, the whole campaign, collect the money, and so on. So you can see there's a good amount of money for these cyber criminals to create a whole network of intrusions and make enough money to be able to retire early. So what should you do with ransomware? Well, there are many different ways that you can overcome the problem of ransomware, but the number one must be education. Education is so important in terms of making sure that users don't click on the spear phishing emails and understand the basic threats that they might face. Backups is ultimately important too, and you should always look at a 3-to-1 rule and at least have one of your backups off-site just in case there is a major outage against your data. The layered protection is so important in terms of skinning the network and to make sure that you can bring in layered defenses once the adversary is in. And it doesn't do any good to have the same type of defense again and again. You will look at creating a layered approach, and it becomes more and more difficult as the intruder moves towards the target, which is typically data. As the NHS found out, network segmentation is key. So if you want to stop the spread of these vulnerabilities, it's important to segment the network up into smaller and smaller sections so that they can be isolated. And then, rather than going for a blacklist approach to your applications and defining what shouldn't be run, you define more of a whitelist approach. And if you can define what needs to run, then anything else is stopped from running from the network infrastructure. So really, encryption has got so many great things about it. But as I said, the three main things that count against it really is the lack of knowledge within the industry, the understanding of even what a digital certificate is, the problems around law enforcement and in the creation of backdoors, and those are the kind of key areas that we have our weaknesses. So you were maybe like me, so I got one of these in the post, and you wonder if we're living in a digital society. You wonder if we're moving towards digital healthcare records and where we use digital methods by default. And that's a problem, because really we need to understand how we can actually start to build data infrastructures which allow citizens to be able to control their own data and to be able to understand the risks involved. So surely there must be a way that we can move away from this paper-based world towards a digital world. And the way it's happened, I don't know about you, but I take my gift signature into a Word document and then I post it to someone, and then they put their gift signature, and then they create a PDF document. For me, that has zero trust in there at all. All we're really doing is making documents that look like our paper equivalents from the past. And DocuSign is hardly the most trustworthy of systems. It asks you to select one of your signatures that it wants, and it places it into document, and then it will produce something that looks a bit more like a legal document. That, again, is just replicating what we had before in a paper world. What we need to understand is how we can build a cybersecurity infrastructure where identity really does matter. We need to create a public sector, our government infrastructure that will understand that we have a digital identity and that we can control our own digital identity in some way. So we're starting to see that, and with apps like Yoti, you can see how you can integrate with government services. But really the scale isn't quite there as we would see in countries like Estonia. So I think in the next few years, we need to understand how we can digitize and build new infrastructures for innovation and how we can make sure that the citizen is integrated into these things. I've been going to conferences, healthcare conferences for years, and every single time I go to these conferences, it's all about citizen integration, and it's all about allowing the citizen to control their own data and to have some online presence for their health and social care. But still, we are faced with the fact that we still receive letters in the post. And the amount of digital interaction that we can have with the public sector is really weak in places. So I'll leave you with a quote from Eminem as part of really the opportunities for innovation. And I think we've missed an opportunity with the rollout of the vaccination programme to look at a large-scale digital identity system in Scotland and in the UK. Hopefully it will come back when we start to look at passporting. I noticed today that the UK government was talking about immunisation passports to be able to get into pubs and to travel. So I say, look, if you had one shot or one opportunity to seize everything you wanted in a moment, would you capture it or let it slip? So in terms of innovation, if you're looking to grow a new company, then I think you should take your opportunity if you can. Thank you.
Bill, a great pleasure as ever. Thank you very much. I can't remember what the doll was called.
Kayla.
Ah, of course. It was that moment when she said, I don't think you want to do that, Bill. I'll go to my grave remembering that. Bill, thank you very much for your time. Bill Buchanan there, Professor Bill Buchanan, OBE from the University of Edinburgh. And sadly, that's just about us for today. Not quite, however. I'm going to say just a few closing remarks before I sort of tell you why. I have to thank all of our speakers today who have been excellent. I also have to thank our conference partners, exhibitors and sponsors without whom this event would not be possible. The exhibition zone will remain open until 4:30, so if you haven't had a chance to go and have a look at it so far, now's a good time to actually do it. Visit the exhibition stands, meet the sponsors, try and encourage them. There's also the competitions and the prizes that are there. Take a couple of minutes, if you wouldn't mind, just to fill out the conference survey. It doesn't take any more time than that, and it can be extremely useful for Digit. They're always trying to refine and improve these events. So if there's anything you springs to mind at all, please just stick it down on the survey form. There's a chance to win one of two £50 Amazon vouchers there. Open your virtual briefcase now to find the survey. And on-demand content of today's sessions will be available shortly and for the next 7 days. The reason we're not entirely completely finished is because after this session, 3 minutes time, SBRC will be hosting a 60-minute non-technical workshop. The session will focus on a phishing attack leading to a ransomware infection. You can join this session directly from the auditorium. So that's SBRC hosting a 60-minute non-technical workshop, and it will focus on a phishing attack leading to a ransomware infection. You can join this session directly from the auditorium.
3:30.
What did I say?
3 o'clock.
I said 3 o'clock. I'm talking rubbish. 3:30. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Upcoming events. Digit's next virtual conferences are Digital Energy Summit 2021. That's Thursday, the 22nd of April. The Digit Leaders Summit 2021. That's on Wednesday, the 26th of May. Registration is now open for these conferences, and you can secure a place by visiting the Digit booth in the exhibition hall. Final big thank you to you for taking the time to attend this. I hope you found it useful and informative and entertaining, and we look forward to seeing you again sometime. And given time, who knows, it might even be face-to-face. From me, Mark Stephen, thank you very much for your attention.